Happy Easter and welcome to that Deacon on YouTube. For the past 40 days, we have gone through the season of Lent, and then on Easter Sunday, our season changes and we are now in the season of Easter, which encompasses 50 days, from Easter Sunday up and through Pentecost. And what I'd like to talk about this month is the Easter season. Maybe 2 years ago, our rector came up with a wonderful idea. It just came out of one of her sermons. But she said, during Lent, you take on a practice or you give up something. And it's a season of self-examination and a judgment as to where you are with your spirituality. Then we hit Easter, and people tend to forget that we are in a joyous season. So she suggested that during the season of Easter, you take on something which gives you joy, something that fulfills you. Maybe it's something that you hadn't done for a long time, and you decide to maybe pick it up again. I took that to heart, and last Easter season, I went back to the piano. I have, of course, composed many pieces during my time, but I really had gotten out of the practice of just sitting at the piano and practicing a piece of music. When I was a student and when I played a lot more piano and I had to give recitals, I honestly enjoyed practicing. So I took those 50 days and I sat down at the piano again to prepare a work for performance. Of course, I didn't perform it, but I went into that time where I could sit with the score, work my muscles in my hands, touch the keyboard again, and make some glorious music. This year, I thought about something in a similar vein. I thought, what could I do to take this time during the Easter season to rejuvenate myself, to look at the joys of life? And I came up with something, and that something is reminders of grace. And a thought occurred to me. As I looked at certain pieces around my apartment, I found out that they were reminders of grace. In the prologue of John, the Gospel according to John, it says that in Christ we were given grace upon grace, gift upon gift. So I applied this to certain things that I have kept over the years that remind me of grace upon grace. And I'd like to share them with you this month, and then give you the opportunity to go into your house and look at reminders of grace upon grace you might have. Years ago, I was performing in Hawaii, and we went to this fantastic bay, which was nestled up against a big cliff that overlooked the ocean. And we were told that was a very sacred site with the ancient Hawaiians, because in little notches in the cliff is where they would bury the bones of their kings and queens and royalty. So here I was snorkeling under that cliff and in the ocean, and I went down to the bottom of the ocean, took a big gulp, and I brought up these seashells. Now, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm not one to necessarily save seashells, but these were something that I picked off the ocean floor in Hawaii. And typically, these would not be reminders of grace upon grace. But when I came up to the surface, all of a sudden, I saw this swirl of gray in front of me. It was like I had the mask and the the breathing apparatus in, and all of a sudden, whoosh, gray went in front of me. Of course, when you're in Hawaii, the first thing you think of is, eep, a shark. And I was all disoriented, and I didn't know what to do, and I came up to the surface, and I looked around, and what had happened was, I was being pranked upon by a group of dolphins. This group of dolphins decided to mess with my head and scare the daylights out of me. And just like a Flipper episode, I popped up, their heads popped up, they kind of giggled at me, and then swam off. So going along with those seashells, I was given this after I told this story. Someone gave this to me as a gift. It is a little wooden dolphin. And this has been with me for a long time. And it reminds me of the grace of nature and how these mammals that I didn't know felt comfortable enough with me to play around, spook me, laugh at me, and then swim off. Here's my story of grace number 2. I was maybe 17 years old, and by a fluke of nature, I ended up backstage at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium after a concert conducted by Aaron Copland. But somehow, I ended up backstage. I thought, well, I'm here, let me try. And I went to the artist store, I knocked on the dressing room door, and who opened the door but the famed composer, Aaron Copland. He took one look at me and said, "You're a composer. What instrument do you play?" And I meekly said, "Well, sir, I play the piano a little bit." Then he said, "What are you working on?" And he motioned to a couch that was in the dressing room. He sat in a little chair, almost like it was a confessional. I sat on the couch, and he sat on the chair, facing me. And I told him about a work I was composing at the time, which incidentally was very Copland-esque. I was writing a series of musical sketches based upon the Calico ghost town that is up in the high desert of California. So I was writing little musical vignettes that had to do with the saloon, the church, the Chinatown they had there, and I wrote this beautiful ghost town nocturne. I wasn't meaning it to be a ballet, but what I wanted it to be was a series of pictures that would be displayed behind the orchestra as the music played. And he listened to me, he talked about my music, and he gave me encouragement. He actually took the time to sit with me and encourage me to keep on and to become more involved in what I was doing. And that chance meeting has lasted me these many years because, as you can see on the autograph I got from him, it was 1972. What he didn't know much later, of course, was that I ended up studying with a composition teacher that studied with his teacher, Nadia Boulanger. So I was able to have that same lineage of teaching that the great master Copland had. And I've always been indebted to that experience. I didn't know it was going to happen when I went to that concert. And for me, it has been a sustaining grace upon grace. One day I was watching PBS, and Katharine Hepburn hosted a program about Spencer Tracy, someone whom she had had a long-term relationship with over the years. Now, at the end of the segment, and at the end of the documentary, she read a letter to Spencer Tracy about his trouble with alcohol. and his fight with personal demons, which included depression.
You said on this subject, never safe until you're 7 feet underground. But why the escape hatch? Why was it always opened to get away from the remarkable you? What was it, Spence? What was it? I meant to ask you, did you know what it was? What did you say? I can't hear you.
And this letter really, really moved me. And to this day, I remember being so moved that I wanted to reach in the television at that moment and give her a hug, because I could feel her pain. She wasn't really acting for the camera. I could tell the honest Hepburn at that moment was being displayed for all of us to see. So not too long after that, I contacted some friends in the industry, and I said, can you get me Hepburn's home address in Connecticut? I don't want to have to go through an agent, because I don't think the letter will get to her. And I explained why I wanted to contact her. And much to my surprise, I was able to track someone down who did indeed have her home address in Connecticut. So I got out my typewriter and I sent her a letter. I remember saying that I know that you're a great actress, and that's not what this letter is about. I recalled watching the PBS special she had presented about Spencer Tracy, and I could tell that this was truly the love of her life, and I could feel her pain. And I recounted the story of saying at that moment, I wanted to reach inside the television and give you a hug. Well, I can't give you a hug in person, so please accept this hug in writing. I mailed the letter, and I thought that's the last of it. And maybe about 3 weeks later, I'm kind of pushing the story here, I gave you a hint. About 3 weeks later, I came home one day, opened my mailbox, looked at this letter, and it did not have a return address on it. And it was very nice stationery. Well, I opened up the letter, and when I flipped it over, all I could see at the very top of the letterhead was Katharine Hepburn. And much to my surprise, she wrote me back and thanked me for the hug and said that it was a very nice letter and wished me the best of luck. I'm not one to save autographs. I have a few in my possession over the years and a few signed pictures from people in the industry. But I decided to frame and mount this letter, not because it's necessarily from the great actress Katharine Hepburn. It's because I, as a human being, connected with her in a way that she needed a hug, and I was able to provide that hug, albeit a letter from California to Connecticut. And that reminds me once again how we as human beings are put on this earth to comfort one another, to lift up the person when they are down, if we are in that particular circumstance. So that reminds me now in my ministry as a person that has to be sensitive to others and to listen and to recognize a hurt and do something about it. So my question to you is, what objects of grace upon grace do you have? It can be almost anything. I suggest during this season of Easter that you look around, study them again, recall why they are a grace upon grace, and see how this may affect your life this Easter season and beyond.